It may be a new year, but trust me, I ain't done talking about kart racers just yet. So having said that, it is kind of funny that even with all my talk about kart racers over the past 2 years, I never really put much focus on Mario Kart during that time, despite it being the series that molded the genre's core to begin with. So how's about we remedy that? Now yes, I could have easily just done reviews of each of the Mario Kart games, but it has been quite some time since I last did a countdown. So I wanted to go down that route instead. And what better topic for a Mario Kart countdown than its lineup of tracks? Now some of you longtime viewers may remember that this actually isn't my first time covering this topic. In fact, prior to my Black Mage Maverick rebranding, I have been part of not one, but 2 different countdowns about Mario Kart tracks. The first was back in 2012 when I was part of a collab channel called The Gaming Family, and then 2 years later, I teamed up with my buddy Kortaguy, who had also been in the Gaming Family's Mario Kart video, to do the topic again. That said, both of my previous takes on this topic were collabs, so I haven't had a chance to give an 100% personal take on the matter until now. So I went ahead and replayed every single Mario Kart game to refresh my memory on the various tracks, and now here I am to present my personal 10 favorites from across the series. No specific criteria will be present in this, no every single game needs to have at least 1 rep rule or anything, so with that said, let's just get right into it. So, would it be a hot take to say that I'm not a big fan of Mario Kart DS? Not to say it's a bad game, it just feels a bit too safe gameplay-wise. Granted, I can understand that choice of direction at the time, given how out there Double Dash had gone right before it, but especially with the improvements the games after DS made to the formula, I didn't find DS particularly fun to go back to, and part of that does have to do with the tracks. I don't know, I just found a lot of them to be pretty forgettable. That said, the ones that do stand out for the right reasons, and a handful of them have become fan favorites, such as Waluigi Pinball and Airship Fortress. So for this entry, I'm going with something a bit more Delfino-y, if you will. For as simple of a concept as it is, Delfino Square is honestly a pretty pleasant track to race on. It's set in what looks like a reimagining of Delfino Plaza, Pianta statue and all, though going for a more autumn feel than the summer vibe that Delfino Plaza had in Sunshine, which hey, autumn's my favorite season, so I ain't complaining. The track has you racing around the plaza, down alleyways, through a pierside market of sorts covered in crates, and across a drawbridge coated in speed panels. Not the most complicated track in the world, or even the most thrilling arguably, but what I really like about Delfino Square is the atmosphere. Like I said earlier, this track is quite pleasant. What with the pretty autumn trees, the soothing music, and the sort of down-to-earth feel of it all. It's like you're racing through a small seaside town, which, when thought about that way, the Piantas cheering on the side actually adds a lot to that feel. Just a bunch of townsfolk excitedly cheering on the event going on in their hometown and all. Now don't get me wrong, I do still find this track fun to race on, especially with its remake in Mario Kart Wii where you're able to do a trick off the drawbridge when it's up. But the general feel of the track is what gets it on the list. It's a cozy track, for lack of a better term, and while it's not the only cozy feeling track in the series, it is my personal favorite of that bunch. Though Maple Tree Way from Wii is also pretty top tier in that regard on that note. While each Mario Kart game tends to throw some fresh new ideas into the mix for tracks, there are a handful of staples that carry over from game to game. The obvious ones, of course, are stuff like the circuit tracks, the Bowser Castle tracks, Rainbow Road, but another pretty notable one is what I like to refer to as traffic tracks. The ones set on actual roads with normal cars driving around minding their everyday business while you race on those same roads. Because of all the other drivers on the road, these tend to be some of the most hectic tracks in their respective games, whether it be Toad's Turnpike in Mario Kart 64, or Moonview Highway in Mario Kart Wii, to name the most notable examples. But with that said, I'm actually going with Mushroom City from Double Dash. I know, a bit of a weird choice, especially given Double Dash's other traffic track, Mushroom Bridge, is quite a bit more popular, but I honestly really like Mushroom City. For one, I think it captures the busy traffic feel of these tracks the best, not only with the setting, the middle of a downtown city, but particularly with the layout. Fitting for its setting, the track has several branching paths, all towards the same destination, but this does allow for some extra tension in the competition, as it's not quite clear which route is the fastest. And that's before you take the other cars driving throughout the city into account, whether that be regular old cars that'll make you spin out, or ones that'll leave your backseat driver dragging on the ground helplessly. Also, completely irrelevant point, but there's actually off-ramps where cars come and go onto the highway, so it actually makes sense and doesn't feel like the cars are just going through a never-ending loop on the track. And that's before mentioning that beautifully jazzy tune that goes with the track. Granted, the song also plays on Mushroom Bridge, but hey, it fits both tracks like a glove, so no problem with that. But yeah, the non-linearity at the core helps make this track stand out for me at least. That, and as I've noted in videos before, I'm a sucker for the look of cities lit up at night, so this track's aesthetic is certainly my cup of tea. I especially like playing this track on multiplayer when I'm able to with friends or family. The traffic tends to make things rather hectic, and I kinda love it. As I brought up at the start of the last segment, each Mario Kart game tends to have some pretty fresh track ideas under its sleeves. Some of these ideas end up becoming series staples, like with Toad's Turnpike introducing traffic tracks, but sometimes these ideas get so ridiculous that they only ever get done once, and more often than not, these make for incredibly memorable tracks. Some examples of this include Daisy Cruiser and Double Dash, Sunshine Airport in Mario Kart 8, the previously mentioned Waluigi Pinball, some layer tracks on this list, and the number 8 entry, a freaking mall! Coconut Mall from Mario Kart Wii is one of those concepts that simultaneously sounds absolutely bonkers, but also kind of amazing. Like, go-karting in a mall. I don't know who on the dev team came up with that idea, but I like their way of thinking. Unfortunately, this track takes full advantage of the concept. Escalators that swap directions, open courtyard areas, even a drive-through with a parking lot, complete with a very accurate depiction of how drivers tend to be in mall parking lots. Heck, one of the shortcuts outright has you driving through a store. Now that's going all out with your concept. It's also got some of the branching path design I brought up with Mushroom City, since you have 2 ways of leaving the mall, and neither of which clearly being the better option. And then there's the music, which just captures the chaotic nature of the track perfectly, while also being a recent remedy for procrastination, apparently? Going off the comment section of the song on YouTube at least, lots of people have been noting this tune as their means of motivating themselves to finish their assignments. Huh. Can't say I could have predicted that. But yeah, Coconut Mall is just an utterly ridiculous idea, and the dev team hit it right out of the park with the execution, making it one of my favorites from Mario Kart Wii's incredibly strong lineup of tracks. Though that ain't the last you'll be seeing of Wii on this list, and I'm saying no more beyond that. Sometimes, a great Mario Kart track doesn't necessarily need to have a crazy idea going for it. Sometimes, it entirely comes down to execution. Delfino Square was a pretty solid example of this, but this next entry is another instance of that being the case. Because in concept, Cloud Top Cruise from Mario Kart 8 isn't necessarily something that'll blow your socks off. It's just a track set in the sky with a cloud and beanstalk motif. A pretty simple idea, and not even the first of its kind. Sky Garden from Super Circuit did this as well. So what makes this track so special, let alone to put it above something as crazy as Coconut Mall? Well, like I said earlier, sometimes it's all in the execution, and in Cloud Top Cruise's case, that's absolutely true. Now, the main chunk of the track does have you in what was advertised, driving along clouds and beanstalks, all while watching Bowser's fleet of airships in the distance. But things then start to change when you're suddenly on one of the airships yourself, and while the moment is brief, you then find yourself launched right into a storm cloud, anti-gravitating your way through as blasts of lightning strike the boost panels. The track dynamic changed in such an instant that it could almost feel like whiplash, but it brings a very sudden burst of excitement that couldn't have been predicted from the track's preview image. And that's not to say that the main chunk is weak, quite the opposite, but the main bit with the clouds and beanstalks combined with this darker, more frantic portion of the track are what make this track so memorable for me. And that's all before mentioning the icing on the cake, the music. In the main chunk, the song is a lovely orchestral piece, but once in the eye of the storm, the song dynamically switches to a heavy rock rendition of the same tune, wonderfully fitting the environment. And to top it all off, Mario Galaxy leitmotif. I know I'm probably going to get hit by the Nintendo copyright police for playing that, but I couldn't help myself. Cloud Top Cruise is just a really well executed track all in all, complete with a beautiful piece of music that calls back to one of Galaxy's best songs. And given its Galaxy soundtrack, that's saying a whole lot. You know, for as much as we praise Nintendo for their knack of innovation, even they can be guilty of taking an idea from someone else sometimes. For instance, you'd think them to be really clever with the existence of Music Park in Mario Kart 7, but you can't fool me, Nintendo. I've played My Sims Racing, I know where you stole this idea. Okay, in all seriousness, it is kind of surprising that it took until the 7th mainline game to get a full-blown music-themed track in the series. But hey, Music Park definitely delivers in that regard. The track's entire aesthetic plays into the music motif perfectly, from the outer decorations to instruments serving as the road you drive on at points, which quite cleverly play along with the music as you drive over them. Literally, the only part of the track that doesn't fit the music theming of the course are the giant piranha plants, but even then, they're bopping along in beat with the music, so they still fit in a roundabout way. Much like with Coconut Mall, Music Park's a case where a crazy idea was conceived and the designers went on to basically do everything they possibly could with it. And again, much like with Coconut Mall, it made for an incredibly unforgettable track. The only complaint I have with this track is the name. Not that Music Park is a bad name, but when it's got a name as brilliant as Melody Motorway in the UK version, you can't help but feel a little underwhelmed. You have no idea how painful it was to only have a single Mario Kart 64 track on this list. It may have been only the second game in the series, but Mario Kart 64 honestly had a lot of really memorable tracks, though unfortunately, only one ended up making the cut. As for which one, you ask? Well, let me just put it this way. Who knew technical limitations could result in such an incredibly creative track? Aside from Rainbow Road, Yoshi Valley is easily the most fitting track in Mario Kart 64 for the term Special Cup. Remember what I said earlier about non-linearity with Mushroom City and Coconut Mall? Well, imagine if that was the entire track, and that's what you got with Yoshi Valley. The track is a full-blown maze, and while the destination remains the same regardless of the route, the journey is a wild ride just off the fact that there's so many ways to get there. It certainly isn't an easy track, but man if it ain't creative and fun. And that's all before mentioning the fact that there's more question mark squares than just the item boxes in this track. See, with the maze-like structure of the track, determining player positions in the standings was literally impossible for the N64's hardware. So, it doesn't determine it. Until people start passing the finish line, knowing who's in which position is a complete mystery. And honestly, that's part of the fun with this track. Now granted, by the time it showed up again in Mario Kart 8, Nintendo's hardware had improved enough to actually be able to track player positions. And admittedly, part of me wishes they still didn't on this track as a fun little Easter egg, but even despite that, the track's still a ton of fun, especially now that each route's gotten a bit more visual flair, including a fancy-spancy barrel cannon. Also, something I hadn't even clued into until I was doing some fact-checking for this video, but the Porcupine enemies in the N64 version are actually one-off enemies that don't appear in any other Mario game. And even in Mario Kart 8's version, they were replaced by Goombas. Rest in peace, freaky porcupine things. Replaying all the Mario Kart games for this video has made me re-realize just how much I love Mario Kart Wii. Granted, yes, its item RNG can be utterly brutal when it feels like it, but man if it ain't an absolute blast to play. And the addition of bikes and the trick system adds so much to the game's dynamic. I remember putting hundreds of hours into this game as a kid, more so than any other Mario Kart game aside from maybe my top favorite, which I'll go into later. And as a kid, my favorite track in the game was easily Koopa Cape. The bouncy music, the creative use of its theming, and all themed around the rather adorable Koopa Troopa. It was all great. And sure enough, upon replaying Mario Kart Wii, it's still easily my favorite of the game's new tracks. As I noted earlier, part of why I love it is the creative use of its theming. The track's set on this foresty island cliffside area, and it really plays into that with the layout at the start, before having you drive down a river through said foresty area. But of course, the real highlight of this track is once you reach the waterfall and drop down the cliff, right into an underwater pipe. I still remember kid me being in utter awe of the undersea environment surrounding you as you speed through the pipe, dodging these electric spinner thingies. And even playing it nowadays, the amount of detail that was put into this environment you only end up seeing for a few seconds per lap is nothing short of impressive. I was actually shown a website during my time at game design school that allows you to freely fly around levels and environments in a multitude of games. And through this, I was able to check out everything that had been made for the underwater section. And yeah, it's definitely impressive. But yeah, it's a visually stunning track, which, with the inclusion of the rushing river, has a really satisfying sense of speed. And the previously mentioned bouncy music definitely amplifies this all. Whenever I think of Mario Kart Wii, this is usually the first track that comes to mind, and for good reason. And hey, with the inclusion of underwater driving, bringing this track back in Mario Kart 7 just made perfect sense. Even though this did cause the removal of the electric spinner thingies. Ah well, a small price to pay for on-the-go Koopa Cape. I get a strong feeling that at least some of you are going to make some strange looks at your screens given this next pick. I've previously gone on record in calling Tick-Tock Clock from Mario Kart DS my favorite track in the entire series. So I imagine there'll be some surprise in it not only not being number 1, but being bumped down to number 3. I'll admit that the main draw I had for me previously was pretty much entirely the aesthetic, rather than the track itself, hence why it's not as high anymore. But that said, factoring in everything else, well, it's still in the top 3 for a reason. Taking the crown for me at least in the crazy idea department, Tick-Tock Clock takes a page out of Mario 64's book, right down to the level title, and gives us a track set within the mechanisms of a giant clock. And while there's no mechanism timing system based on the clock hand's position with this rendition, the track still goes all out with the theming, from the aesthetic of every single nook and cranny of the track to the clockwork-like sound of the music. Presentation-wise, this is easily my favorite in the whole series, mainly due to my love for both inner mechanism aesthetics and for the whole time theming. And that's before you take the gorgeous HD overhaul gotten Mario Kart 8 into account. But hey, it just so happens that there's a solid track to go with this motif. The designers cleverly incorporated the motif directly into the track itself, not just with the obstacles being spinning clock hands or swinging pendulums, but with racers driving across clockwork gears as they turn. That also happened in reverse directions every so often. And with the version in 8, you can do tricks off the gears to keep that speed going. on top of approaching this section with a glider ramp. It's certainly not an easy track, but it's definitely satisfying to go through successfully. And again, the overall motif helps make it that much better for me. Yeah, I'll admit that the theming is largely why I enjoy this track. What can I say? I know what I like. As weird as it is to say this about something like DLC, one of my favorite parts of Mario Kart 8 was the inclusion of DLC characters and especially tracks. I don't know, the idea of incorporating additional content on top of what there already was an exciting notion, and I think track-wise at least, the DLC was definitely worth it. We got a handful of tracks remade, a few new tracks, but most notable was the new tracks themed off of other Nintendo IPs. Would have made sense to just stop at making a Legend of Zelda track and an Animal Crossing track to go along with the added characters, but Nintendo went the extra mile by incorporating tracks themed off of some of their other racing IPs. Excite Bike Arena was definitely fun, especially with its unique notion of being randomly generated, and as a longtime lover of the F-Zero series, Mute City was an utter delight. But then Nintendo decided to treat the F-Zero community with another one. Don't get me wrong, Mute City was great, but for me at least, Big Blue completely overshadows it. It goes for the 3-section structure that was introduced in Mario Kart 7, and is among those that really benefit from this structure. Especially with the fast pace of the track, even before you factor in 200cc, having the track never loop works well in the track's favor, both visually and structurally. Not having the arbitrary need to loop allowed for the devs to kinda just go nuts with the track design, and go nuts they did. With tons of twists and turns and a Koopa Cape-esque river that keeps your pace up, on top of the track being 100% anti-gravity, Big Blue really does capture the hectic feel of F-Zero, more so than Mute City in my opinion, and this has helped with those extra sprinkles of F-Zero flavor, such as the coin chart stations for Mute City, and, as simple of an Easter egg as it is, that never ceases to make me smile. And then there's the music, just Making a track based on Big Blue was a genius concept, if only because it allowed for a jazzy rendition of the Big Blue song to exist, which is just an absolute treat to the ears. If you couldn't tell, that exhilarating feeling of high speed is something I really enjoy in racing games, and probably more so than any other track in Mario Kart 8, or maybe even the entire series, Big Blue really captures that feeling as perfectly as it can. And then you race through Big Blue on 200cc, and for a moment it almost feels like we don't even need a new F-Zero game. Keyword almost. You almost got me there, Nintendo. Now before we move on to number 1, I did want to quickly go over some honorable mentions, because narrowing it down to just 10 for this list was kinda torturous. So I wanted to give some shoutouts to the ones that almost made the cut. DK Summit from Mario Kart Wii. Wasn't expecting to like this one as much as I did when replaying these games, but the trick system makes this track an absolute joy. And I like the overall theming of a winter sports slope as a track. It's like Mount Wario before Mount Wario, and with more Funky Kong. Baby Park from Double Dash. Simplistic in design, but the embodiment of pure Mario Kart chaos when items enter the mix. Every time I play Double Dash with friends or family, racing on this track with 9 laps and frantic items only is an absolute must. Sunshine Airport from Mario Kart 8. Never even thought of the idea of an airport track prior to 8, but it suits the glider and anti-gravity mechanics of this game incredibly well, while being really fun to race on. Airship Fortress from Mario Kart DS. Taking a really cool idea from Mario 3 and translating it into a really fun track. Not much else to say, really. Royal Raceway from Mario Kart 64. Pretty solid circuit track, but I'll be perfectly honest, being able to drive through the castle courtyard from Mario 64 is why I like it so much. Fun story, actually. As kids, my sisters and I had found the courtyard and wished we could get into the castle, and our uncle took that exact opportunity to introduce us to Mario 64 for the first time, fulfilling our wish of getting into the castle. Ribbon Road from Mario Kart Super Circuit. Easily the most standout track in the game for its creative aesthetic, and its remake in Mario Kart 8's DLC made the whole track even better. And Rainbow Road from Mario Kart 7. The most creative Rainbow Road in the series structurally, and the music that plays is nothing short of majestic. Best Rainbow Road by far, don't at me. And yes, that does mean I didn't put a Rainbow Road on a best Mario Kart tracks list. Is that even legal? More so than any other Mario Kart game aside from maybe my top favorite, which I'll go into later. Well, it's later now. So my favorite Mario Kart game, without a doubt, is Double Dash. Yes, it's not the most balanced of kart racers, but man, if it ain't a blast to play. In particular, I love the 2-character system, and how the characters you pick determine which karts you can use and which power-ups you'll get. So for the first time in the series, there's actual strategy in who you pick beyond just simple weight classes. It also helps that Double Dash introduces a lot of really solid tracks into the series. Seriously, Double Dash has a ton of top-tier tracks that makes picking a favorite rather hard to do. Well, actually, no. Picking my favorite Double Dash track, and in turn my favorite track from the series, was actually quite easy. It's the one with the big cannon. Okay, yeah, probably a weird choice for a favorite Mario Kart track, but I've been incredibly fond of DK Mountain since I was a kid. I remember watching gameplay of Double Dash when it first came out and being utterly fascinated by the barrel cannon set piece. And while yes, several tracks in the series following Double Dash have incorporated the barrel cannon, there's something still oddly magical about its first use in DK Mountain. But don't worry, that's not the only reason why this is my number one. It just so happens to be a really fun track too. There's something really exciting about launching off directly towards an active volcano, only to race your way down it as boulders come tumbling down the road, and finally to cross a rickety bridge to do it all again. The twists and turns of the track also lend really well to Double Dash's drifting system, making pulling off those turns exceedingly satisfying. It may not be the most complex track, structurally or thematically, but as I've said before with Cloud Top Cruise, sometimes it comes down to execution, and DK Mountain absolutely exceeds in the execution. And just when I thought this super fun track being in my favorite Mario Kart game wasn't enough, it was then brought back in my second favorite Mario Kart game as well. And man did it benefit from Mario Kart Wii's new mechanics. The trick system especially, what with the addition of ramps in the rocky portion and on the edge of one of its sharper turns. It also means I can now race on DK Mountain with the funkiest of Kongs. Nintendo, you spoil us. And that marks the end of my first countdown in nearly 2 years. I know a bunch of you have been wanting me to do another one for quite some time now, so I felt like treating you all. Now will I end up doing more countdowns as 2021 goes on? I don't know yet. So I guess we'll all have to wait and see. With that said, thank you all for watching. This has been Black Mage Maverick, and until the next video, have a nice day everybody.